evening. Welcome to another edition of Meteorology Lab here on St. Patrick's Day, and pretty sunny. Down here in Texas, we've had kind of a quiet weather pattern here, but things are warming up quite a bit. We've got tropical air flowing up from the south and don't have enough moisture for severe weather, but minimum temperatures. I've got the chart here, and you can see 67 there at DFW for a low temperature. So that's quite a bit above normal. A lot of 60s and 70s for the south part of the U.S., and as we go north, the northeast is where we have the bulk of the cold air. Still up in New York and Pennsylvania and New England there. 1 degree up there in New Hampshire, and 4 up at whatever station that is up in Maine. 500 millibar chart showing northwesterly flow again. So that's been helping to push some of the cold air out of western Canada. The Arctic air mass source production region is pretty much in this area right here. This is what affects the lower 48. And with this northwesterly flow in place, that's been able to easily dislodge some of that air and bring it southeast. We have to have a very strong meridional pattern with northwesterly flow to bring that into the central U.S., and we just have not had that over the past several weeks. A lot of long-wave ridging across the western U.S., and this is responsible for temperatures being a little bit on the warm side. Polar front jet from Washington up to western Ontario, kind of like that. So this is the next system coming into the Great Lakes area. That'll be in the region, in fact, it's already there. And then we've got one more system out west that'll move into that area, and then we'll be shifting our attention down to the western U.S. Here's the dynamics for tonight. Let me get this chart centered here. Okay, that's the current chart. And before I go too much further, we'll take a look at the chat, see what's going on here. We've got Fred Reamer up in North Dakota. We have Andrew and Fun with Tech is here. Ron Chalfont, Ryan Toomey's, Michael Burrell, Brett Dean, Fred working at the Grand Forks CWO. Got Ahmed here in Saudi Arabia. Alexi. Tim's asking about, Ron is asking about the new El Nino. I haven't checked that out, so I have to feign ignorance on that and look into that new news and see what's going on there. Ryan enjoying the 60-degree weather in South Florida, drinking St. Patty's. Sounds pretty good there. Fred calling 29 Fahrenheit isentropic lift. Sue M says evenings, happy St. Patrick's Day. Got Victor Cabot here. And Ryan mentioning next week being possibly explosive. And yeah, I definitely agree with that. Explosive outbreak possible for the central U.S. and Midwest and even the Southeast. Jason Boggs getting ready to chase some storms, and yep, looks like we will be heading in that direction here shortly. So there we go. We're showing the long wave ridge out over the western U.S. This is the next system coming into the California region. That'll be approaching there on the coast over Saturday and Sunday. The path of that will go mostly up to the north, and this will be the last shot of strong dynamics up in the north. The system we have right now, you can see that right here, strongest lift out in the Chicago area, out to Detroit, and that's shifting to the southeast like that right there. And this is associated with a jet streak. Right there, between the strongest cyclonic vorticity here and the strongest anticyclonic, which is probably going to be in a band kind of like that right there. Actually, I should use the in designator for that So N for that, and X for the cyclonic vorticity. So that's outlining the jet streak position. And with that goes the strongest upper level dynamics. That'll head mostly into the Carolinas by tomorrow evening's webcast. And as I mentioned, a little activity coming up for Ontario and Quebec for March 20th. I don't think we have any viewers that far north. There's Fred up in Grand Forks, but I'm surprised we don't have any viewers up there in Canada, to my knowledge. Next system coming on shore here in California. You can see that coming together on the 21st. And on the 22nd and 23rd, that'll be coming across the Rockies. There it is right there. And as you are probably aware, having just watched what I was pointing out with that jet streak, here's another one right there in Southern California on the morning of March 23rd. That'll come across the Rockies and bring very strong dynamics into Texas late on the day on Friday the 24th. So there we go. That's going to be the first possibility of severe weather. That'll move quickly to the east overnight, so maybe some severe weather if the timing holds out through Arkansas, Louisiana. And then on Saturday the 25th, that'll be heading into the Ohio Valley area in through the southeast U.S. And we can also use this upper air chart to get an idea of the southernmost delineation of the severe weather. And we do that by painting the jet streak. And let me do that real quick. So there's the jet streak right there. Most of the severe weather we're going to find is going to be to the left and immediately along the jet streak. And as we go further south in this area, severe weather potential rapidly declines. So at this point, we can say that probably the Gulf Coast is off the hook for severe weather. But as you go north into northern Alabama and northern Georgia, severe weather potential goes up quite a bit. So then I rapidly move east, and here comes shot number 2 coming in from the Rockies, very same path. And we can see that this has a little bit more of a southeastern punch right along the Gulf Coast right there. So we draw the jet streak right here, and we're looking at severe weather potential basically from the Gulf Coast up through Tennessee, just like that. But of course, this is 280 hours out, so a lot is subject to change here. In the GFS towards the end, look at that. Another shot of severe weather for Texas on April Fool's Day. And some more potential coming here, so we're certainly getting into an active weather pattern here for late in March, going into early April. Let's see if we have any upper air charts. Let's check out SPC's experimental upper air maps. 0Z at 850. Nope. We should be at the 18th at 0Z. So this is an example of when you would be using digital atmosphere to fill in some of that upper air data. But we can see this last night. Actually, let me advance to this morning. .850 millibar chart for this morning. You can see we've got some strong southwesterly flow. A little bit of a maybe weak low-level jet through this area right here, but very veered. And we can see that the Gulf is not really tapped very well here. And that's pretty much what we expect with the stronger dynamics up in the north part of the U.S. Not much down in the south. And really that's what attracts a lot of the flow from the south. That's what gets the parcels accelerating from the Gulf northward. And without that, we're left with this very weak flow coming up from the south. And there's our next system right there, lurking offshore off the California coast. And we can see that it's pretty mature here. So the main surface low back in this area right here. We're looking for the jet stream to be oriented something like this. I would go with probably a configuration kind of like that at first glance. And the other possibility, depending on what type of system this is, you could be looking at that kind of structure also. And from what I remember of that 500 millibar chart, we were actually looking at something like that right there. But in any case, the surface fronts are going to be oriented something like this right here. Warm front up here through Oregon and Washington, and then an occlusion probably curving back to the surface system somewhere in here. Some pretty good showers here between Hawaii and San Francisco. It would be interesting to be out on a ship checking that out right there. The thermal structure to the atmosphere showing things are kind of moderating there in the northeast U.S. Here comes the next system through the Great Lakes. And that's the structure I'm going to go with on this system right here. And you can see that the stronger thickness gradient is focused right in this area. So the polar front jet is going to be just south of that area. Pretty much right in here. Not up here in the Great Lakes. So what we have going through the Great Lakes is more of an occlusion. It's associated with that and a little bit of this cold pool associated with the upper level system out over Minnesota and Wisconsin there. And there comes the next system out over the Pacific. Fronts oriented like that. And don't see much of that curvature coming back to that surface system, so yeah, that's kind of a good question of what we have going on out there. It doesn't really quite match the model charts, so this is something I would be kind of going back and forth trying to figure out. And I think what we have there is mostly, probably this being mostly upper air dynamics on the back side here. So chances are if we went up to 850 and 700, we would probably start seeing some of that polar front boundaries kind of pulling back behind this area here. Actually, it looks like it's right back in there. And then the main occlusion, that appears to be off the coast of Alaska right there. So anyway, that's a little bit of the analysis process of looking at all the charts and looking for consistency between them all. For the soundings, we're going to look at Fort Worth here and take a quick look at what we have outside. And you saw in the opening clip a little bit of cumulus and stratocube. And that's because we've got a tropical pattern here with this loaded gun. So if we had a little bit more moisture, a little bit more upper air support, we would probably have some thunderstorms here in Texas. So trying to raise this parcel here, we don't clear this cap. Lots of convective inhibition there. And then above that, not much cape. Okay, let's take a quick look at the Midwest. And I know that this is kind of hard to see, but there's the latest chart here. This is the GFS model. And you can see the red isotax here at 850 millibars. I'm sorry, the red isotherms at 850 millibars. This is showing that the 850 millibar front is pretty well to the south, from about Nebraska to northern Missouri and out to southern Indiana. So this kind of supports the idea that we have of the surface fronts being pretty well to the south down in this area. That's another example of using all the charts to get consistency. In this example, we're finding vertical consistency here. Okay, so I think we're ready to head into the forecast. Let me get that all set up here. So here goes our outgoing system right here. I guess incoming if you're out on the East Coast. Kind of configured like that. And we've got this triple point here in Illinois. Maybe something like that. Let's see if we can find that triple point here on the surface chart. So here we're looking at Illinois and Indiana. So there's our front coming from the west. And then our warm front appears to be way down in the southern part of Illinois like that. Let me see if I can pan that south. I don't think I can. I think that's as far north as I can get the map, or as far south. But right there, you can see the warm sector down here in the Carbondale area, 55, 57, one little 60 and 54. So that right there is going to be near the triple point. Okay, let's see one last look at the chat here. A little discussion about the next systems coming in, and yeah, let's take a look at that. Move forward on the GFS. Looks like kind of a quiet weekend across much of the U.S., except if you're out on the Atlantic coast. You're going to have this system to contend with just off the edge of the screen. And by the time we do the webcast tomorrow, that's going to be mostly off the coast here. And back here, this looks to be mostly the upper air system and maybe some of the occlusion back over Pennsylvania, so a lot of snow showers in that area. Warm air advection for the Central Plains. Pretty good lee side trough there in Montana and Wyoming. And here comes our next system out west, and we can see the thickness gradient pretty well piled up in this area. That's the next front coming on shore there in Oregon and western Washington. And that'll cross the Rockies, and then by Sunday, by the time we do the webcast then, that'll already be on the Canadian prairies. Kind of like that right there. Cold air advection coming in on the backside of that. And then by Monday, that'll move well to the north, and this is when we start watching things out in California. And here comes our next system. On the 22nd, that's already crossing through Southern California. And by the 23rd, here it is crossing the Southern Rockies. So this will probably be the first day of potential severe weather, I think, here on the 23rd on Thursday. This is kind of like the day before the big dynamics. The front is starting to come out onto the Texas Panhandle. And I'm pretty sure the dry line is going to be active that day. We may see that configured, maybe something like that, or maybe like that. So depending on just how much moisture we have coming north, we could see a few storms along the dry line and close to this triple point area right here in southwest Kansas. Then the main dynamics start rolling out. We can see that the GFS breaking out some early showers on Friday, 18Z here on Friday the 24th, and then by evening that's moving out into East Texas. So possibly severe weather there from eastern Oklahoma down to East Texas, maybe even as far south as Houston. But we know from what we saw on the dynamics charts, the southern limit of that strong destabilization, the strong cap removal, that's going to be confined to north of that line right there. Okay, by Saturday night on the 25th, that'll be moving quickly eastward. Some more chances for severe weather in Alabama and Georgia, possibly Tennessee and North Carolina too, and maybe even further north into the Ohio Valley. And then here comes our next system. We see the thickness contours piling up once again in Arizona and New Mexico. And looks like on the 26th, on Sunday, that will be the first possibility of severe weather in the high plains. And then moving out east of I-35 here on Monday the 27th. And once again, that'll move out to the eastern U.S., southeastern U.S., maybe a little further south towards the coast. And then here comes our next system through the Pacific. There's those thickness contours, getting the gradient going once again in the Four Corners area. And more chances for storms here on the 31st, Friday going into Saturday, so that's probably going to be a big chase day. With the weekends being very popular for chasing, I'd imagine we're going to see a lot of chasers out that weekend. So we're probably going to be focusing on maybe between I-20 and I-70, maybe even a little bit further north of that, and then in this area right here for the 31st. Then on the first, things will push eastward, and we're going to be looking at chasing in the jungles of Oklahoma and out into East Texas, kind of in this region. Not optimal chase territory, but I'm sure people are going to give it a go there. And the chase territory out in western Missouri is not too bad. So we'll probably see a little bit of that going on. But again, we're 372 hours out, so a lot can change between now and then. When that comes into range with the European model, we'll start looking at that also. And here we go again. More possibilities for severe weather in early April. So yeah, we're getting into an active weather pattern, and we'll certainly be covering that. Okay, well, that's about it for me. I appreciate you watching tonight, and hopefully you'll join us tomorrow. There's a possibility that I will take a break either Saturday or Sunday. I'm going to have to check my schedule and see what's going on, but I will post on the YouTube live page. When you see the clock start counting down, that's when we will have the webcast, and I'll try to send out a Twitter announcement. Anyway, thanks for joining, and we'll see you tomorrow or on Sunday.